Mike, I want to start out talking about the Rice Owls and the very wise decision, pun intended, by the Owls to have a service academy mentality when it came to selecting a coach with an offensive system that they can actually replenish. And so far, so good. They're 3-1, and it's paid off for them.
Yeah, when they, moved on from Mike Bloomgren and wanted a new head coach, they wanted somebody who had a unique offensive system and somebody who had won at kind of private academic institutions like Rice. And Scott Abel immediately jumped to the top of the list as a fun, interesting offense. It's the triple option, but he will be very quick to point out it's not the Army or Navy type of triple option. He kind of compares it more to early Chip Kelly at Oregon, the gun choice stuff. And so he thinks that it's an exciting brand of football. He's won at places that typically don't win because of academic standards before. And they think they can bring that to Rice and through a month. So far, so good.
Mike, we had somebody on earlier who was asking, just like kind of thinking out loud of like, is this the biggest Texas Tech game since they went up to Norman in 2008? And that did not work out well for them. And off top of mind, I don't feel well-versed enough in Texas Tech to remember if there was some game in like 2015 that was a big one. But how big is this game against Utah coming up in Salt Lake City, in your opinion, tomorrow?
Yeah, it feels pretty huge. I think the winner of this football game becomes the favorite to win the Big 12. Obviously has an inside track to get to Arlington and play for that, which now comes for a college football playoff spot. And I think everybody knows the statistics by this point. Like Texas Tech hasn't won an outright conference championship since they were in the Border Conference in 1955. So they're trying to make the ceiling the floor. With their resources, what used to be a great season at Texas Tech, I think now would be a disappointment, and that would include 9-3. And if you look at their schedule, they have a few road games that are going to be tough, and this is the first one. If there's been a thing like a knock against McGuire so far as a head coach at the collegiate level, is they've not been great on the road. I think they're 6-11 coming into this year on the road, and they haven't been all that great in September. And so this has an opportunity to kind of right those wrongs and have proof positive or like a proof of concept of those resources. So they invested heavily along the offensive and defensive line, and what better test to see if you hit correctly than to go up against Utah on the road and match those guys in the trenches.
So I've noticed as of late, especially with his very nice start, Behren Morton, they're kind of playing like the chip on the shoulder card with him. And you think about it like, yeah, I can see where they're coming from with that. What do you think about, like, I guess kind of the overall opinion on Behren Morton, the way he's played thus far this year, and how much do you think that like the him versus Dampier dynamic plays into the outcome tomorrow?
Yeah, I think Morton kind of gets looked over specifically, in this state when we're talking quarterback. I mean, it's a loaded year of quarterback. Sawyer Robertson got a lot of press. Obviously Arch Manning down in Austin, but you got, Kevin Jennings and Josh Hoover and Marcel Reed and Connor Wigman and Malachi Nelson. You can go down the list. I think Morton, because of the injury history, missing a couple springs, having the shoulder questions, kind of being in and out of the lineup at times, has clouded how good he's been. I think Mac Leftwich, their new offensive coordinator, is a super good play caller who's been he's a quarterback at UTEP, knows that position. And so I think the best is in front of Morton. There's just always going to be the worry of, can he sustain it? Can he hold up for a full season? He got dinged up in week 1 and has been able to come back. So as long as he's healthy, I think Texas Tech has a chance to win the Big 12. And he's always had NFL talent. Like, you got to remember, Texas Tech. This is the previous staff, but Texas Tech chose Behren Morton over Sawyer Robertson.
Right.
They were both in that same class. Robertson is going to school at Lubbock Coronado. His dad is an alum there, and they went with Behren Morton, the Matt Wells staff, because they really believed in him. I think he's got a lot of talent, and he's got a chance to put it together now, I think, with a really good team.
Sawyer Robertson has his own big game this week with Arizona State, the defending conference champs, coming into town. What do you think about the Bears and the Sun Devils this week in a game that neither defense has been really, really tough yet? Baylor's has not been good really quite at all yet. But this one, I mean, it's got two good quarterbacks. It's got all the makings of a really classic Big 12 game. They're not ranked, but that's just because they've both taken early losses. They both could be ranked by the end of the year if they both keep on good tracks.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, if you're a Baylor fan, how much do you think your offense has to score to win this football game? Like if I walk up to a Baylor fan and I say Baylor scores 31 points on Saturday night, do you win or lose? I think a lot of them probably choose lose, right? And so, I think that's my question with the Bears. They always say defense travels, and you can be more consistent on that side of the ball. Like, you're going to ask that offense to be great 12 games in a row. They were good against Auburn, not so great in the red zone, but they have to be that efficient. They have to score almost every single drive. Arizona State's kind of in a similar situation. So, yeah, I like you said, I think it's going to be kind of a classic Big 12, maybe the last team to have the ball wins. I think it'll look a lot like the SMU Baylor game. I think Baylor's going to have to be in a bunch of those type of games, and is that good when you're in year 6 of a defensive head coach?
Does it feel like it's a different Texas A&M now post Notre Dame than the A&M we were talking about prior to that for a while?
I think so, and it's because Mike Elko is just impervious to that stuff. I think he was a great hire for them. I think he's great for the culture. He's exactly what they needed post Jimbo Fisher. I think we've talked about that before. And his confidence and his, he just doesn't care about the history of it, right? Like, he was at the Houston Touchdown Club and they asked him about like the Aggie battered syndrome, and he kind of just dismissed it as like, guys, will you cut it out and just be excited for what we're doing on this football field? And so the passing game has been great. They went into the portal and got 2 really good wide receivers that have been awesome so far. It looks like Marcel Reed has really taken a step forward, and they're just asking him to do what he does best. Like he was under 50% completions against Notre Dame, but still played a great game. So I think A&M, maybe this ends up being something more about Notre Dame. Maybe we look back on this game and it's like Notre Dame wasn't as good as we thought they were, but that's typically a game the Aggies go and lose, and they win and won it. And I think that should be celebrated if you're an Aggie fan.
How many alarms should be going off about Arch Manning so far?
A few. You leave the shoe against Ohio State, and it's very easy to chalk that one up to who you're playing against. Really good defensive coordinator who's been in the NFL and knows how to confuse quarterbacks. You're going to have talent on Ohio State. It's just very easy to be like, well, he had a bad game, first true road start. Like, he's got 3 weeks to figure it out before they go play in the SEC. Well, 2 of those 3 weeks are done. Like, the get right games are almost past. Sam Houston's about as bad as you get. And so we'll see how he looks Saturday. But if they don't move the ball well against the Bearcats, and this offense, especially through the air, continues to struggle against Sam Houston, then I just think that's what it's going to be this year, and we have to recalibrate what we think Texas is based on what that offense is instead of what we think it could have been.
I know this is not a big national headline, the Iron Skillet TCU SMU last matchup going on for a while, but what's more controversial to you, the ending of this rivalry or SMU distancing itself from Pony Up?
Both seem like own goals that don't need to happen. I guess I'll go with the Iron Skillet just because the Pony Up doesn't impact me too much. I'm of the opinion that college football was made great because of the regional rivalry. Like, the fun part of the sport to me was rooting for a team that may be different than my best friend rooted for, or my uncle rooted for, or my cousin, or whoever I see in daily life. And a game that's happened 104 times, has a name, and has a skillet, like has a trophy, probably deserves playing. And it shouldn't be lost because a team wants 7 home games and they'd rather, schedule the cupcake to make their resume look better, or for the head coach to not have to go back to his old stomping grounds and maybe catch some flack. And, I think those are the reasons this game is going away, and that's a shame. I think it eventually comes back, but it didn't have to come to this. And, I think as SMU moved up to the Power 4 level, all the reasons TCU had to get rid of the game went away.
Mike, I'll make a prediction that it probably comes back quicker than TCU anticipated, in that SMU, based on whatever the ACC does, trying to get to 8+2 or 9+1 to get 10 Power 4 games on the schedule, that one's a pretty easy one to get on, considering that half the members of SMU's conference will already have somebody that they have a rivalry with, that they've played for as many years as the Iron Skillet's been going on. So I do think that because of the ACC scheduling, it's got a great shot to come back, because SMU is going to need something that's pretty easy to fill. And if they can get TCU to back off their, what I think are silly reasons for not playing it, then that works out for everybody.
Yeah, I do think this is a one-sided breakup, so SMU would make it work no matter what, even without any new scheduling rules. Like, SMU wants to keep playing the football game. It's TCU that doesn't. And so maybe public perception, I've seen a lot more articles. Like, I've been writing about this for a couple of years, like this is going away and it shouldn't. But it feels like a lot of like more national sites have written about it this week. And so maybe public perception kind of pushes a new athletic director to put it on the schedule. But I was there with my buddy, this spring when I was going around to do the summer magazine, and I asked him about the game, and he said, the head coach has a lot of say in who we're going to schedule, and I don't think there's a huge appetite right now between within our fan base and within the coaching staff to play it. And unless that changes, I just don't think we see it in the short term. I think it does come back. I just don't know if we see it over the next few years, because it's so ridiculous that they schedule these things like 10 years out. But we'll see.
Well, we found out in COVID, it wasn't as hard as they were making it.
Correct.
Yeah. It just was not as hard as they were making it. Do you have a prediction on Tech in Utah? Do they get it done?
That's a $1 million question, right? I'd have a bigger house if I could figure that kind of stuff out. Yeah, I want to see the Tech defense handle this type of physicality on the road before I would bet on it. I think it's priced pretty well. It seems like it would be a coin flip game if not for it being in Utah. That's typically a tough place to play, but the good draw for the Red Raiders is at 10 a.m. local time. I do think that is pretty significant. I guess I'm leaning Utah here because of their offensive line and the fact that they're playing at home, but Tech has looked so good. I don't know. If it's a blowout, I think Tech wins. I think Utah could win in the dogfight. I'll take the home team here because it's the Big 12, and I have no idea.
Mike Craven, thanks for hopping on, buddy. Always great to hear from you, and thanks for committing later in the day. We certainly appreciate it whenever we can get you. Thanks, Mike.